everybody, this is JDGaming back today with another iteration of the most beloved deck on my channel. Psychics, of course, they ended up getting hit kind of badly when Lithosagym is gone. Now you're not getting rewarded for free earth monsters being put into the deck and onto the field, and you can't rip apart your opponent's extra deck of link monsters. Darn. But I did find a different way to approach the deck that allows us to really take a look at Psychic's inherent strengths, and I think it's an interesting build because whether you're new to the channel or revisiting from the previous build, it's something different, and I think there's something in here for everyone. So as usual, this is going to be a let's build, and I'm going to explain my card choices and why things are in here in the quantities that they are. But if you just want to see the alphabetical profile that you might see on other channels, I have a link to that in the description box down below and pinned in the comments section as usual, so you can go ahead and check that out. And then if you have any questions, check out the middle section of the video where I explain that thought process. So let's get started. The first step, of course, is to establish the theme, and we've already chosen Psychics, and our powerhouse card would be Emergency Teleport, which is a quick play spell that lets us go and special summon any Psychic monster that's level 3 or lower from our hand or deck, and the only stipulation is that monster gets banished if it stays on the field during the end phase. A problem with this is it was just too powerful in other themes that could tech Psychics or use Psychics, and so it's limited to one at the moment, so we're going to have to look into some alternatives here. Fortunately, the theme's Recruiter, Serene Psychic Witch, is a pretty good one. So starts off with 1400 attack, which is not the greatest, but as an earth monster, Mrs. Radiant powers are up to 19, which is very nice for a recruiter. And her ability is when she's destroyed in any way and sent to the graveyard, you can banish a Psychic monster from your deck with 2,000 or less attack, and then during the following turn's standby phase, special summon that monster that was banished by this effect as long as she remained in the graveyard. So the cool thing is you can hit cards like Esper Girl, who trigger off of being special summoned from being banished and set up further synchro or link plays. If we take a look at Esper Girl, she's a level 2 Earth Tuner and says when she's returned from banish, you can go and banish a card from the top of your deck face down, and the coolest thing is when she hits the graveyard, it's a mandatory effect to draw essentially that banish card to your hand, and that's really cool because that lets you maintain advantage when you synchro summon. You can link summon with it because it's an earth monster, so you can go misses with it. You can even use it for tributes or block battle, attacking, whatever. So much flexibility in this one card, so it ends up comboing very nicely with Serene Psychic Witch. Or you can go a totally different route. Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit's been a really popular hand trap these days, but she's also a Psychic you can activate from the field. So Witch and Teleport can summon her to the board, disrupt your opponent's play immediately, and that ends up doing a lot when you're able to bring the monster back thanks to its Psychic typing. The inherent flaw here is the fact that Serene Psychic Witch is always going to be slow. Like, you can kill her immediately with a Metal Foes monster or whatever, and it's going to activate in the next turn, not this turn. So you can't combo her off with cards like Esper Girl, which is a problem. I mean, it's 2017. We can't just sit around and wait for battle to take care of everything these days. And so that's where these floaters come in. So these two are basically different flavors of the same effect, the way I think of it. This is Silent Psychic Wizard, who's a level 4 Earth with 1900 attack, and then Hush Psychic Cleric is a level 3 Earth with 2100 defense, 0 of their opposite non-useful stats. Both of them are able to banish a Psychic from your graveyard like Esper Girl, and then when they hit the graveyard, have the same mandatory effect to claim that monster, except it goes and special summons itself to the field, which is really cool because that can even bring back entire synchro monsters, can bring back Esper Girl for her effect, bring back more monsters like Witch for floating. Whatever you want to do, you're able to do it with these cards, which is really cool. And they trigger on normal summon for Wizard and for a discard cost for Cleric. So Cleric's really interesting because you lose a card, but there are a lot of ways we can turn that into an advantage. One thing is we can, of course, manipulate what card we banish, because now we can send a Psychic from our grave, provided we have one in the grave already to activate its effect, and we can control what we would like to actually summon. So Esper Girl in hand becomes Esper Girl in grave if you already have a Ghost Ogre yarded there from your opponent's turn. The plays are just really interesting with this card in particular. Plus level 3 is a very nice combo level in this deck, so very fortunate that it has that ability. And the last Psychic monster is Psychic Jumper. This is another level 2 Earth Tuner. Its stats are meager at 100 and then 1500, but its effect is amazing. So it lets you pay 1000 life to choose one of your Psychics that's not Jumper and one of your opponent's monsters, and you force a creature swap on them. So now you give them your floater monster, steal their best monster, kill your floater with it to claim its effect, and then you can synchro or link summon using that monster, because the only stipulation is you can't go and change the battle positions of the monster that same turn after you've used Jumper's ability. So lots of cheeky plays you can do with this card to round out the Psychic package here. I mentioned Serene Psychic Witch's long-standing flaw, and for the longest time, I always tried to play against that ability. Try and find a way to go ahead and, just cheat that ability or whatever. I don't know if I was ever very successful at that. We of course have Emergency Teleport, which you could just use, summon Psychic Jumper, give your opponent the Witch, and then you're able to trigger her ability as kind of a free effect. But with Teleport at 1, that's not even the most consistent thing in the world anymore. So I needed some way to make sure Witch was actually helpful. Lithosagym actually ended up being a good fix for that, because you could destroy Witch proactively, get a free card on the following turn like a Ghost Ogre, and you were able to rip apart your opponent's extra deck from Lithosagym's effect in the meantime, so that put enough pressure on the opponent. But now that's gone too, so we need to go and look at things from a different angle. And the best solution I found is actually playing 3 copies of Scapegoat along with Witch. Back in 2011, one of the things you could do is set Witch and pass. But it's way too slow for 2017. Sometimes you'll get a game where that works, but most games you can't rely on that, because your opponent will just get too much from a free turn without opposition. And so I like Scapegoat in here because now we're able to generate 4 free Earth monsters, and the Link monsters that you could summon off of Scapegoat are just phenomenal for this deck. So you already know Mrs. Radiant gives a power boost to all your monsters, including the Psychics, and all it costs is 2 Earth monsters, so Scapegoat helps fund that. And then on top of that, we can go ahead and use tokens for Proxy Dragon, who's cool because he diverts any destruction effect to a monster he points to. So just have Witch or any of your other floaters with Proxy Dragon, and you can protect your entire board at the expense of one of your floaters, and that actually synergizes to put you in a better spot than if you, didn't have the Scapegoat. So that's why I really like that here. It just gives you so much free power. You're able to rely on Witch. You have enough defenses to survive even if they summon 4 other monsters. You'll still have Psychic Witch's effect, and most likely you'll have at least a token, and you can start making plays from there. So don't forget, you can take a bit of a hit in the early game. Let yourself take some life point loss if that means you get more tokens and you get a free misses or whatever. But it just generates so many free cards, I found it worth playing. It's also interesting to play maximum copies of Solemn Strike and Warning. I know, again, I just said you take a hit early in the game, but it's not the worst thing in the world when you're able to crowd control with these cards. These are so good at getting rid of huge pendulum summons, strings of summons that are reliant on one key monster being there, or just key monster effects like Castel that could shuffle away your floaters without triggering them. So back this up with a Naturia Beast, and you're able to prevent yourself from getting killed by like Twin Twisters as well. Like, there are so many cool things this does for the deck. Helps make sure your defensive setups are as powerful as possible. And on top of that, we'll play 1 copy of Torrential Tribute because it's got all the power of Dark Hole, but, it's a trap card. No one likes playing traps because they're too slow, but Torrential really works nicely in this deck because you're triggering all of your Psychics while getting rid of your opponent's board, and then you can, you float your monsters, so you're not really losing much. You can Scapegoat to refill your field, all while getting rid of your opponent's free cards that they flooded onto the board. So I don't know, it ends up working very nicely here. I feel like Torrential has potential here because of the synergy with your key cards. But of course, this isn't 2011, it's 2017. And so, whereas we were able to use Teleport before to speed up our game, we can't do that anymore. And we definitely do need the power and speed that a card like this could bring. If you've been following my channel for a while, you probably know that I've been using the Brilliant Fusion engine. And you might also be asking, wait, you're not playing the Brilliant Fusion engine? And surprisingly, this time, I was kind of shocked myself. No, and there are a few reasons for it. To be completely honest, playing Brilliant Fusion to summon a Seraph Knight while yarding a light Psychic like Ghost Ogre to the grave, having a free high-level Earth monster and Seraph Knight that you can synchro or link with, and get an additional normal summon for, it was such a powerful card. Like, Brilliant Fusion did more for this deck than any one card ever could, especially with Lithosagym, because, extra Garnets you wanted to play were also live because you could just kill them for Lithosagym and rip apart your opponent's extra deck. The Seraph Knight lets you go and summon a bunch of monsters, and you can do some crazy combos with the Psychic you've already planted there. It just seemed perfect, but in this defensive build, the games last longer, and Seraph Knight usually gets used up or killed way before your next turn. And so that was a problem for me. I didn't want to have to rely on a one-shot firework type of it's gone after use effect like Seraph Knight. And granted, I could have played, you know, the second Garnet. I could have played an additional Seraph Knight, but it just seemed too clunky to do that. And so I decided on an alternative route. And the answer I ended up coming up with was Brain Research Lab. And so this is a field spell that isn't played a lot in Psychics, but it's pretty good. It lets you go and get an additional Psychic normal summon per turn, but you put a counter on it if you're successful. You can also put a counter on it instead of paying life points for a Psychic monster's effect. If it's something like Psychic Jumper, you know, you don't have to pay. So it's kind of like a student loan in that you get to put a counter on it instead. Problem is, when this card leaves the field, usually it's your opponent killing this thing, you're going to have to take 1,000 damage for every counter that was on it. So it really is kind of like a loan. Like once they find out, you know, you're going to have to pay, or once you graduate, you have to pay. The biggest thing with Brain Research Lab is you're not really using it for Jumper. I know you could play it with Overdrive Teleporter, but I took that out of this deck just because I felt it was a bit too risky with the Solemns. Essentially, what you're able to do is use this for additional normal summons, and that goes a long way, more than you might think in this deck. The reason is, let's say you have an Esper Girl planted in the graveyard already. If you normal summon Silent Psychic Wizard, you can go and banish your Esper Girl, and then you can normal summon again and summon another tuner monster, turn the two of these into a level 6 like Psychic Nightmare, and that's really cool because now you get to use Nightmare's ability to see a free card in your opponent's hand, kind of like a spiral monster looking at the top of your opponent's deck. And you summon Esper Girl, who lets you go and banish a card from the top of your deck, and you can get that card right to your hand when you go and tune them together into something like an Omega or a Scarlight or a Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon. And you know, that just does so much for just one normal summon in addition to your regular normal summoner set. So that's why I originally reached out for Brilliant Fusion in the first place. It sets up the Ghost Ogre. You can't do that combo with it unless you're playing like a Psy-Frame monster, but you know, I don't know. There are options I've explored. I just thought this was the best because it sticks around unless your opponent kills it. And, you know, with Castel eating up an extra zone, which is way too valuable, and people not necessarily always playing MST, Twin Twisters, Cosmic Cyclone, where I play, this ended up being a safer pick. And since it lasts longer, you can use it turn after turn with your defensive floating psychics, you know, in a longer game that you're able to create versus the one shot, everything fails after the one, you know, explosion of Seraph Knight. So that's why that's there. And the coolest thing, I think, is that you could play Terraforming along with it because it's a field spell. So I originally started with 2 of these and 1 of this, but I upped Brain Research Lab to 3 because I felt it wasn't enough. The idea was you want to play Terraforming before you play the 3rd Brain Research Lab because you essentially still have 3 copies. You know, you have 2 and 1, but if you draw the Terraforming, you thin your deck by 1, which works out really nicely. It just wasn't enough copies, though, for this deck, so I ended up bumping this up to 3. Don't forget, you can go ahead and play up to 3 Terraforming as of the recording of this video. So, you know, experiment with it if you'd like. You can go and take different quantities into account for that. It's all possible. Quick note on Psyblocker. I know you can call Brain Research Lab and get rid of its ability to hold counters, and I used to play at least 1 Psyblocker in all my decks because I was always like, you just witch to summon this thing and you can't get screwed over by your opponent's floodgates and whatever other plays. And that's true, but I feel like Psyblocker is too risky of a card to play right now because 1, it pretty much demands your normal summon unless you're fortunate enough to have the rest of your infrastructure allow like a Hush Psychic Cleric to cheat it to the graveyard. So it's just a bit too risky there. And then on top of that, if you're using your Serene Psychic Witch to summon out your Psyblocker, you're not comboing off and you're probably losing as a result of it. So I love Psyblocker, but relegate that to the side deck. You can go ahead and bring it in when you need it. And you probably shouldn't be calling Brain Research Lab with it anyway, unless you were doing some absurd like Mind Master combos in traditional format. So I don't know. I just took out Psyblocker because of that, but Brain Research Lab still works because you're getting like 1 or 2 counters, you know, in a turn, so it's not that bad. And finally, I used to play Pot of Duality in this deck because I thought, you know, I have floaters, I have hand traps, I can go ahead and make the most out of that defensive setup and get free cards. But the special summoning aspect, even in this build, really hurts. That's because if Witch gets killed during your opponent's turn, you're forced to special summon during your turn, and now you can't play Duality, and that's terrible because now you can't play Duality for free cards, or if you didn't special summon and you play Duality, now you can't go ahead and play Crane, and other really powerful cards. So I didn't like Duality as much in this current build. Instead, I'm playing the much more polarizing Pot of Desires, which, I'll be honest, I wasn't a huge believer in this card in Psychics before either, because yeah, you banish cards and Banish Psychics should deal with Banish, right? But you can't do anything with face down Banish unless you summon Omega, and I don't care what anyone tells you. Omega may be good and it could bring back key cards, but that's not making an impact on your board or anything. It's not worth going into just for that. You're better off just playing multiple copies of all your Psychics. You can play 2 of all the okay ones and 3 of your best ones, and you pretty much never lose all of them because of this, which is great. Like, the cheating effect of this, though, the +1 that you get for free on top of Brain Research Lab's extra normal summon, means you can put together some insane combos very consistently. So this was just like the best alternative I found. It's like Duality and letting you set up your defensive plays if you need it, but it can also be used for aggression, especially when you have cards like Brain Research Lab to allow you to take advantage of those resources. So I don't know. I just found this to be the best possibility here. Yeah, you lose one-ofs like Raigeki and Emergency Teleport sometimes, but I feel like this has done more good for my deck than bad after testing. It's time now to go and flesh out the rest of the main deck. And I like starting off with a pair of Crane. This is an extremely versatile card because of its Earth level 3 ability to bring back a monster from your graveyard that's also level 3, because now you can get free monsters for Trishula. You can go and summon, Serene Psychic Witch and float because her effect's not negated in the graveyard. But by far the best thing you can do with Crane, I think, is access Mrs. Radiant, because you have 2 Earth monsters. You could summon Mrs. Radiant. That's cool. But then when your Mrs. Radiant dies, don't forget she floats into an Earth monster in your graveyard, which you get back to your hand. A lot of people like playing 1 copy of Mrs. Radiant because then, she gets killed. You put her back in the extra and you can do that. But I just like playing 2 copies of Mrs. Radiant because now when she dies, you go ahead and you summon you add your Crane to your hand. You special summon the monster, you go ahead and link again for the 2nd copy of Mrs. Radiant, and then, you basically make it so that you have access to Mrs. Radiant for the constant boost and the constant 2 zones. So really do think that combo is worth noting there. And some other monsters we can take advantage of because of their Earth attribute are these plants. So I really started using these with Lithosagym because, free destruction for the summoning of Lithosagym and all that. But it's really good in link format here because Dandelion spawns 2 tokens, which means if you go ahead and have Dandy already in your grave, let's say the tokens are already gone, so you don't even have the benefit of that. Just this means you can go turn the 2 of those into Mrs. Radiant and then turn the next 2 tokens into Proxy Dragon right then and there. So there's obviously synergy here. But Dandelion can work nicely with your other floater monsters as well, because if you witch into any Earth monster as an example, you can still normal summon Dandelion and then go ahead and do the exact same combo. So very, very powerful for that. Glow Up Bulb lets you get an additional Earth monster in itself, which is cool. You can synchro with it, which is nice as well. You can discard both of these with Hush Psychic Cleric to claim their effects as well. So lots of synergy still, despite the lack of the Lithosagym. And then Foolish Burial ties this package all together because you can yard any of these. If you're getting a free Proxy Dragon, that's not a minus. If you get your Glow Up Ball back for free, then that's not a huge issue as well. So lots of good things you can do with that mini engine. I'm very happy with that. And then a pair of Gigantes. Basically this is like a powerful version of Spell Striker, which I used to play way back in like 2010, 2011. Essentially, you banish a Psychic, any Earth from your graveyard to summon this card, and then it's just a special summon only monster. It has 1900 attack, which is pretty good. It becomes 24 with misses, which is excellent. And then if you crash it in battle or if it gets killed, it has a heavy storm effect, so it clears every spell or trap on the field when it's killed by battle. So all around, very useful card. You can use it for plays. You can use it just as an attacker. Very flexible and adds a lot of speed to the strategy. And then I like playing the 1 Soul Charge. This thing, since you're playing mainly Link monsters like Proxy Dragon and Mrs. Radiant that have effects even if you revive them into the main monster zones, and you're playing monsters like Naturia Beast and Crystal Wing, you're able to just get so much advantage when you're able to bring stuff back when they're whole monsters, or you could just bring back the pieces and then make big combo sequences using Hush Psychic Cleric, Dandelion, and all that stuff. So Soul Charge is extremely powerful in this deck, so I definitely Love it in that spot. The last two limited cards here aren't more for power. They're more for just rounding out the deck. Max C, sometimes it's useful as an Earth. This time it's not, but it's still very powerful because it lets you draw into other cards, including Ghost Ogre that you can use immediately. So I do like it for that. And then Raigeki, basically, you summon so much in this deck that if you can clear your opponent's board, you're able to push for game out of nowhere. So this just helps you deal with annoying monsters that you can't just, you know, Psychic Jumper or whatever. Or you could steal their monster, then Raigeki, and then push for game or whatever. So lots of possibilities there. And finally, we need to flesh out the extra deck. So I like playing Borreload as our last Link monster here. It's not the easiest thing to bring out because it's a Link 4 that needs 3 effect monsters or more, and this deck floats into 1 monster at a time, not multiples. But if you can invest into it, it's kind of like Trishula or Leo, which this card replaced, in that it's just so hard to deal with. It's immune to any targeting by monster effects, which is kind of like Leo, and that's why I ended up choosing this instead, because it's easier to summon. You don't need a tuner monster. You're able to go and weaken a monster your opponent controls by 500 attack and defense. Is just a quick effect, and it's permanent, and your opponent can't respond to it, which means you're able to cheat a lot of victories in battle. On top of your Mrs. Radiant for 500 constantly. For your other Earth monsters, that's a lot. You know, you get 1,000 extra difference from the printed stats, which makes this very powerful. And finally, the ability to steal your opponent's monster at battles into one of these zones means you're able to go and synchro with it, make all your plays you would with Goyo Guardian or Psychic Jumper, and so it just fits perfectly with what this deck is trying to do. And since you have 4 arrows, you know, this way and this way, you're able to go ahead and make all the extra summons you would like with it. And then some of the monsters you might summon into those zones. So at each of these levels, we have a Psychic monster and then another monster that's just good for that level. So the reason we have a Psychic monster like Android is because you can bring them back with Silent Psychic Wizard and Hush Psychic Cleric, who don't care whether it's a Synchro monster or anything else that you're bringing back. So cool thing with Android, 2400 attack level 5, easy to use with Ghost Ogre for a Crystal Wing. You can bring her back to use as material or to attack with, which is cool. And I know she has an ability to gain life points. That could come up. I've never used it, to be completely honest, at least in recent history. I used it like way back when this card first came out for that effect. It's not going to happen that much. You want to use it as an aggressive attacker that'll come back, or as 5 stars of material. And then Naturia Beast, you know, I love Naturia Beast. It's on my mat. It's been one of my favorite cards for a very long time. But as an Earth monster, it becomes 27 now with Mrs. Radiant, and it still backs up all the Solemns that you put in this deck, so it became even better than when I first started playing this card way back when it came out in Hidden Arsenal 2, so very, very happy for that. At 6, we have the pair of these. Both of these are Psychics, which is pretty cool. I briefly showed Nightmare earlier in that combo. Basically, you get to look at a card in your opponent's hand and guess whether it's Spell Trap or Monster before you look at it, of course. And if you guess right, it's like a spiral effect. You know, you get to go ahead and gain 1,000 attack permanent or for the turn cycle. So basically it goes up to 3,400 until the end of your opponent's turn, which means you can do a lot of damage attacking an opponent's monster. You can get over a lot of things, and even if you get weakened by Mrs. Radiant, because, you know, it's a wind monster, you'll only go down to 3,000, which is still very viable. Honestly, I usually use this on a combo sequence to Crystal Wing, because Crystal Wing doesn't care about a decrease, thanks to that attack pump ability. But, you know, you get free knowledge in that process, and it's a Psychic, so you can bring it back, which is very nice. And then Psyhemoth is in here because Psychic Nightmare is not generic. You need a non-tuner Psychic for that, which removes it from Crane Crane. Crane Crane can summon Psyhemoth, you know, off of a Ghost Ogre or something you yard early game. And it's really cool because it's a Earth 2400 attack DD Warrior Lady. So that means if your opponent is trying to kill this thing, they have to deal with a 2900 attack monster with misses. They'll probably kill it with card effect, which means it went to the grave, and then you just bring it right back with one of your Psychic effects. So very powerful for that interaction. At 7, we have Black Rose Dragon and Cyframe Lord Zeta. So I know the Black Rose Dragon is an interesting, it's basically another version of Torrential Tribute, if you will. You're able to go ahead and bomb everything, still trigger all your Psychics, so it's good for that reason. But on top of that, I'm playing plants in this build, and so you're able to go ahead and make sure that you have extra damage to score through your opponent's defense monsters, because they get flipped up to attack, 0 attack. You could attack it with like a Psychic Nightmare, for example, for 3,400 damage, for lots of extra damage out of nowhere to win games. And then Cyframe Lord Zeta is really cool because Link monsters are now very popular, and a lot of Link summons are key to the rest of the turn going off. So basically, the way this little brother of Omega works is he's a 2,500 attack Psychic level 7, generic materials, and he says, when your opponent has a special summon monster during either player's turn, you target that attack position special summon monster and your monster, banish them, and then they return in the following turn. But He then leaves the extra monster zone, as does your opponent's link monster. So now their arrows are gone, they didn't get to make their plays, and you get your monster out of the way so you can make another summon. So I don't know, this card is just really, really cool, especially because it's not Psychic Life Transfer. We finally have a worthwhile Psychic monster to play that we can bring back from the graveyard in case the opponent takes care of it, or you synchro it with Glow Up Bulb for, you know, again, Crystal Wing, because that card's a monster. And then at 8, we have Omega. Everything that's good for Omega is good here, except it's also a Psychic, so you can just bring it right back, so it's even better. And then Scarlet Red Dragon Archfiend is really neat for its ability to catch up on your opponent. If your opponent has summoned a bunch of cards, you can just blow things up here. And then 3,000 damage with its attack is very sweet as well. Don't forget, you can kill all your floaters with this thing and do a lot of damage, which will not work because it'll miss timing because your opponent takes the burn damage first, unfortunately. So don't use this to kill a witch you floated into, but you can go ahead and kill your Esper Girl, your Hush Psychic Clerics. Those will all still work. So, you know, you can wreak havoc on your opponent's field and life points with that. Trishula is even better for that purpose. You know, just summon out your floaters, your Crane. You can easily access 9, and what else can I say? It's just Trishula. Solves a lot of problems. And finally, our Phantom Knights of Breaksword is our lone Xyz monster. It's rank 3 because it's the easiest to summon with Crane and your level 3 Psychics. And basically, I have this in here as backup. Every time I take it out, I wish I had it, and when I have it, I almost never summon it, but the idea is you Crane into this thing. You can go ahead and pop your floaters or Dandelion tokens or Scapegoat tokens to use its effect, kill annoying cards. And if you're playing early game, you have a Crane, but you don't have a tuner, and you don't want to go for a Link monster, you know, this is a nice alternative. Lets you make the most out of the cards you're playing already. If you watched the video in its entirety, thanks. Psychics are definitely one of my favorite themes of all time, and so I really hope you guys enjoyed this deck profile as much as I did putting the theme together. We'll start off with the main deck here. It's 40 cards. We have double Crane, Dandelion, double Esper Girl, triple Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, double Gigantes, 1 Glow Up Bulb, 3 Hush Psychic Cleric, Maxi, double Psychic Jumper, triple Serene Psychic Witch, and a pair of Silent Psychic Wizard to round out the monsters. Then for our spells, we have triple Brain Research Lab, Lone Etelli, Foolish Burial, double Pot of Desires, Raigeki, triple Scapegoat, Soul Charge, and Terraforming. And then last, we have the full Solemn Brigade, 3 strikes and a warning. We have Torrential Tribute, and that rounds out, again, the 40-card main. And then our extra deck, starting with the links here, we have double Mrs. Radiant, Proxy Dragon, and Borreload Dragon. Then for synchros, we have Magical Android and Naturia Beast at level 5, HTS Psyhemoth and Psychic Nightmare at 6, Black Rose Dragon and Cyframe Lord Zeta at level 7, Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon, Cyframe Lord Omega, and Scarlet Red Dragon Archfiend at 8. The Mighty Trishula at level 9, and the Phantom Knights of Breaksword is our lone rank 3. That's the end of this video, but if you enjoyed it, I encourage you guys to leave a like and share it so we could spread the video to as many other people who may enjoy the content as well. If you like this series, you can see more of it by clicking the video annotation on the right, or you can click the one on the left to see the last video I did. And if you really enjoyed what you saw today, then I invite you guys to subscribe to JDGaming to see more Yu-Gi-Oh! Updates. Thanks guys, this is JDGaming, hope you guys enjoyed as always, and I'll see you guys next time.